Hi, this is Rhonda and welcome back. Today I'm going to make cornbread, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to butter my dish, which is my least favorite part of this whole process. Okay, so I'm going to be doing a double batch, so I have a 9x13 casserole dish, and I picked up the butter with some plastic wrap. This is the way I found the best way to do it over time. I discovered this works the best. So I've got that mostly done, and then I'm gonna take the plastic wrap and do this. Then I'm going to take a little bit of flour, do this, and then I'm going to take this over to the sink. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to the sink, and I'm going to do this. Excess flour is going into the sink. And then what I discovered is there's areas it doesn't get. So I found one of these I can use for, like, you know, putting barbecue sauce maybe on stuff. And if you go like this, it's going to get it all in the little areas that you missed and get the excess flour off so you don't have clumps of flour. This works pretty good. And then I'm just going to tap it. This, and I'm ready to put cornbread in there. Okay, so I am going to be doubling the recipe today because we love cornbread and we eat a lot of it. So the original recipe called for 1.5 cups of flour, and so if you add 1.5 cups and 1.5 cups together, that's 3 cups of flour. So I'm going to start with my dry ingredients. And when measuring flour, you want to make sure you have a flat edged, like a butter knife, or if you have a spatula, that's great too. And you level it off. 1, 2, 3. So I did the flour. I'm going to set the flour aside. Okay. So the next ingredient is 1 cup of cornmeal. So I just put the cornmeal in a container like this because it's not so easy to measure it out of the original container. Cornmeal, I'm doubling it. So 1.5 and 1.5 is 1. So 1 cup of cornmeal. You measure cornmeal out pretty much the same way as you measure flour. So you're going to want to level it off. So 1 cup of cornmeal. Okay, so the next ingredient is 2 tablespoons of baking powder. And the original recipe was 1 tablespoon, so it is 2 of baking powder. And make sure it is baking powder and not baking soda, because if you mix up the two, it will not come out right. So this is baking powder. So I'm going to dip in here. And you have to level it off. I use the lid to level it off. So that's 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons. So that's it for that. And then a teaspoon of salt. And when it says it When it says a teaspoon of salt, I usually just put in a little bit of a dash. You need some. You don't necessarily need all of it. We don't need a lot of salt, but you need some to make the baking powder work. So I'm just going to throw that in here. And that is all our dry ingredients. So we have 3 cups of flour, 1 cup of cornmeal, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt. Oh, see, it's good to always double check, because I almost forgot the sugar. And so I always go back and read it all through. So we need 1 1/3 cup of sugar. Okay, when doing sugar, you also want to level it off. You do the white sugar. So that's 1 1/3. So the original recipe called for 2/3 cup sugar, and I'm doubling it, so I'm putting 1 1/3. So now I'm just going to take a fork and I'm going to mix this all up. And then I'm going to set aside after I'm done with this, I'm going to set this aside and we'll start working on the liquid ingredients. Okay, so on to the liquid ingredients. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the eggs out first, because I like to always take a look at my eggs and make sure that I don't have anything going on bad with the eggs. So I'm going to do the eggs first. And the original recipe called for 2 eggs, so I'm doubling it. It's going to be 4 eggs. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I got a little bit of eggshell in here, so I'm going to take my part of my egg, and you can collect it pretty easy, like attract to it, and get the eggshell out of there. And I'm going to double check. I'm making a mess. Okay, I'm going to double check. There's another one, and it's kind of hiding, so I'm under the other one, so under the yolk. Get that out. I usually buy brown eggs, but with holidays and everything, they didn't have the brown eggs I love, so I'm using white eggs today. Doesn't matter really if you use brown or white, whatever your favorite egg is. Alright, so now we have the 4 eggs. I'm going to rinse my hands. Okay, so I have my 4 eggs. And the next thing to measure is 2 1/2 cups of milk. So the original recipe was 1 1/4 cups of milk, and I'm doubling it, so it's 2 1/2 cups of milk. So I got my big measuring cup out, and 2 1/2 cups is right there. And when measuring, I can do this, okay, so you can see it. Okay, so when measuring liquid ingredients, you have to get level with your measuring cup. So we're going for 2 1/2 cups of milk. So I'm gonna lean like this until it gets level with the 2 1/2 cups. Okay, so it is level with the 2 1/2 cups. Before I actually pour that in with my eggs, I'm going to beat the eggs a little. And I'm going to, so I got my milk and my eggs in the bowl, milk and eggs. And then it calls for, the original recipe was 3 tablespoons. It calls for 6 tablespoons because I'm doubling it. And I don't want to have to go ahead and measure 6 tablespoons out, so what I ended up buying over time, and it really saves me a lot of time and just making it life easier, is I got one of these measuring cups, and so here it has the 6 tablespoons. So that will make it easier than trying to go ahead and count out 6 tablespoons. Again, the oil is liquid also, so I have to get level with it, and I have to pour it like this. Make sure I don't get too much because it wouldn't taste right. Okay, so I'm looking and it's level, and that's the 6 tablespoons of oil. I'm personally using sunflower oil. I think any type of cooking oil would just be fine, so whatever you have, as long as it's actual oil. So vegetable oil, corn oil, probably even olive oil, but I wouldn't recommend olive oil because that has its own taste, kind of a stronger taste, so I wouldn't recommend that. So canola, corn, sunflower. If you do corn oil, it'll just make your cornbread taste have even more of a flavor of corn, so that would be fine. So we got the milk, eggs, oil, and now we need a cup of melted butter. So I'm going to rinse out what I used because I don't want to dirty a whole bunch of dishes. I'm going to rinse this out of the milk, and then I'm going to melt the butter in the microwave. Okay, so I'm going to put so this is 1 cup. Original recipe called for a 1/2 cup. So on your butter, it tells you 1 stick is a 1/2 cup. So a 1/2 and a 1/2. Whoops. A 1/2 and a 1/2 is, trying to get it to the right, 1/2 and a 1/2 is 1. Okay, so I will pop this in the microwave oven and melt this butter. Okay, so my butter is melted, so I'm going to pour it in here. And then I'm going to take a fork, mix all my wet ingredients. Okay, I'm going to go over this one more time to tell you everything I have in here. So I doubled the recipe. So I had the recipe calls for a 1.5 cups of flour. So I doubled it, so I put 3. It calls for a 1/2 cup of cornmeal, so I doubled it and I put in 1 cup of cornmeal. It calls for 1 tablespoon of baking powder, so I put in 2 tablespoons of baking powder. It said a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, so I put in a full teaspoon of salt. So that's what's in here. And then in my wet ingredients, it said 1 1/4 cup milk, so I put in 2 1/2. It said 2 eggs, excuse me, and so I put in 4. It said 3 tablespoons, so I put in 6 tablespoons. And it said 1/2 cup of butter, and I put in a cup of butter. Now let's go back to the dry ingredients. I think I forgot to tell you that it said 2/3 cup sugar, and I put in a 1 1/3 cup of sugar. So if I went too fast earlier, and I might have been skipping around a little. All right, so now I'm going to, and also, if you were making a single batch, you would use an 8 by 8 or a 9 by 9 baking dish. This one that I'm going to be using is a 9 by 13. All right, so I think we got all the math issues cleared up here. So I'm going to pour the liquid ingredients into my cornmeal, into my dry ingredients. That includes the cornmeal. Get everything off of there. And then I'm going to take this over to the mixer, and we're going to mix it up and pour it in the pan. Okay, now this is called cornbread, but it has when you mix it all up, it has the consistency of a cake. So I do not need a bread, like a dough hook for either, bread dough or cookie dough. I don't need this type. It's not necessary. Okay, I don't need a whisper, because I'm not doing egg whites or something light and fluffy. So the one that I need is this style, which is what you would use if you were doing a cake or stuff that's that consistency. Okay, I'm gonna put my splash guard on, and then I'm gonna start mixing this up. Okay, so we're gonna check this. Okay, so what I need to do right now is scrape the sides. Trying to get rid of some of these strips. Okay, so if you don't own a rubber spatula and you're going to do a lot of baking, I would recommend buying one. They're very good for scraping the sides. I'm just scraping the sides and pushing everything down. And then the other thing I'm doing is on the bottom, sometimes stuff gets stuck. I'm going to scrape that. So we're very close. Just going to run it through the mixer one more time. Meantime, I have preheated the oven to 350. So, and it has beeped, and so it is preheated, so that's good. Okay, do it a little bit more. Now, if you don't have a standing mixer, you can use a handheld mixer. This recipe you probably could do by hand, but one of the reasons I really like the standing mixers, for some reason this is having an issue. Not sure what's going on here. Okay, I had some technical difficulty. I had to have my husband help me out. Apparently I got some debris inside the mixer thing, and it was causing it not to be able to come out very good, but I think we got it good now. So there we go. All right, now we're good. All right, so I'm going to move this aside. I'm going to go get my tray. Okay, so now time to pour the cornbread into the tray. And like you can see, it's like more the consistency of cake than it is bread. And that's why I didn't need the bread hook or the dough hook. Scrape it all in. Okay. I'm just going to kind of shake it back and forth so it's even. And then I'm going to put this in the oven for, let's see, what does it say? 30 to 35 minutes. But this tray is larger than the tray that was on the original recipe. And the original recipe I got off of, it's the original recipe that was on corn meal packages for years. There's new recipes sometimes on there, but this one is, quote, the original one. So it says 30 to 35 minutes. So I'm just going to play it safe, and I'm going to check it at 25 minutes and just to see where we're at. And I will periodically let you see how it's looking as we go along. Okay, let's take a peek in the oven, see how it's coming along. Okay, it's got longer to go, but that's kind of how it's starting to look. It's starting to smell good. All right, we will check back soon. Okay, let's look in the oven and see where we're at on this cornbread. We're getting very close. It smells like it almost might be done, but I want to go ahead and put a toothpick in here and see. Don't lose your toothpick. And it is really, really close, but not quite yet. I'm just going to let it go for like another minute or two, and then I'm going to pull it. Okay, so let's check the cornbread now. I'm going to take it out so that it's easier to see. Okay. Take a toothpick. You don't have a toothpick, a fork will work, and I'm going to put it in, see if it comes out clean. And it's coming out nice and clean. So it is ready. And I'm going to let this cool down, and then we'll do a taste test. Hi, we're back, and it's time for me to check out some of the cornbread. See how it came out. So let me show you how it looks. I cut a corner piece. I like the corner pieces. Not everybody likes the corner pieces, but it's still warm, so I'm going to try it. I have to have a little bit more. Very good, super moist. It's still warm. Tastes very good. Now, what I do sometimes is after it's no longer warm, a lot of times I'll refrigerate it and then I'll heat it up in the microwave in a microwave safe plate. And I'll heat it for like maybe 20 seconds and melt some butter on top, and that makes it taste really, really good. Very good for breakfast in the morning. So cornbread's great as a side dish around the holidays, but it's also really good when you make some homemade chili with cornbread. It's absolutely delicious. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you decide to make yourself some cornbread or make the family some cornbread. And thank you for watching. Thank you for those who have subscribe to my channel, and please subscribe if you haven't. Have a great day. Bye-bye.